For all its beauty and splendor, the wilderness can be a cruel teacher. There is joy when embarking on a road trip. The sky opens up and the land stretches wide and waiting. The world feels honest again. The horizon never lies. That is the beauty of it. But trust the wrong thing, and the road will turn on you. The GPS says turn left. So you do. The shortcut looks fine at first, until they narrow to gravel, then to dirt, then to nothing at all. You drive deeper, thinking the voice will fix it, but it doesn't. And just like that, you're off the road and into the teeth of nowhere. Just rocks, dust, and the sound of your vehicle being stuck. Out here, a wrong turn isn't just a mistake, it can be a death sentence. Let's venture back to the savage wilderness where survival is earned, not given. This is outdoor disasters. For Ronnie and Beverly Barker, their road trip would be a disaster. In 1964, this is where the love story began. Ronnie Barker met Beverly and fell instantly in love. Ronnie told the story many times of when he first saw her. He knew he wanted to marry her. They were married on November 18, 1982. They had 3 children and enjoyed a life of faith and adventure, purchasing an RV and embarking on many road trips together. When they weren't traveling the country by RV, Ronnie and Beverly Barker usually had it parked in the driveway of their Indianapolis home. That's the one thing Ronnie looked forward to when he retired. He wanted to travel. One morning in March 2022, the Barkers' RV waited outside like an old, trusted friend, white, weathered by miles, but always ready to carry them toward another horizon. They weren't running away from anything. They were moving toward something, toward family, toward warmth, toward the last good chapters of a life lived with love and intention. To the neighbors, they were simply a retired couple hitting the road again. To those who knew them well, they were wanderers with purpose, people who believed that time should be spent, not saved. Their first major stop would be Albany, Oregon, a place that had never been home yet always felt like it. Their children and grandchildren lived there. After the family visit in Albany, they would set out in their 2015 Forest River Sunseeker motorhome, towing their Kia Soul to head south. Their plan was to meet up with friends in Tucson, Arizona a few days later. Both Ronnie and Beverly had some medical issues common to their age. Beverly often used a walker or wheelchair, but they were experienced travelers and knew their limits. Upon arriving in Oregon, Ronnie and Beverly were greeted with the warmth only family can give. Tight hugs, familiar laughter, and the comfort of knowing they had made the 2,300-mile trek across the heart of America safely. The journey from Indianapolis to the Pacific Northwest was long, but the Barkers were seasoned wanderers. They thrived on the solitude of the open road, the endless sweep of mountains and deserts. This was their rhythm, their ritual, the adventure that breathed meaning into their golden years. They rested for a while in Albany, recharging with their children and grandchildren, retelling old stories and making new memories. Yet even as they settled into the gentle pace of family life, the road tugged at them. They were not the kind of couple who stayed still for long. Soon, they would point their RV south toward Nevada and the next chapter of their journey. It was supposed to be a simple route, straightforward, familiar, safe. But this year would not be like the others. Beyond the laughter of their grandchildren and the calm Oregon evenings, a different fate waited. In a few days, Ronnie and Beverly would be tested like they never have. What began as a single simple mistake would spiral into a crisis far greater than anyone could have imagined. The morning of March 26, 2022, the Barkers kissed their family goodbye and headed south towards Arizona. Their route was supposed to be simple: Stagecoach, Fallon, Tonopah, Las Vegas, then on to Tucson. They had driven variations of this corridor before, but Nevada, with its vast expanses of uninhabited land, offers dozens of roads that look promising and very few that actually are. They arrived at a gas station in Stagecoach, Nevada, late afternoon. Beverly sits in the cab as Ronnie fills the tank. Ronnie goes inside to use the restroom and grab some snacks. When they pulled back onto the highway, the plan was to continue east toward Fallon, roughly 40 minutes away. That was where they planned to stop for the night before making a long push the next day toward Nellis Air Force Base near Las Vegas, where Ronnie, an Air Force veteran, had privileges to stay at the RV campground. They left Stagecoach without worry, planning to reach Fallon before dark. It was supposed to be an easy ride along a familiar route. But somewhere between Stagecoach and Fallon, the Barkers' path diverted. A choice was made, small, subtle, and irreversible. And this is where their fate began to shift. The RV's GPS suggests an alternative route, a shortcut that appeared to cut diagonally southeast, bypassing Fallon entirely. It was likely presented as a faster option, the kind of recalculation most people accept without a second thought. But this shortcut wasn't a highway at all, and the Barkers unknowingly crossed the threshold from the safe, predictable world they knew into territory that few people ever enter by accident. The new route looked harmless enough at first, a quiet desert road leading southeast, an alternative path around Fallon, perhaps faster, perhaps more scenic. They had no reason to question it. After all, it was the same GPS they'd trusted for years across thousands of miles. Technology had become their silent co-pilot. But this road carried them slowly into the Silver Peak region, a place where the land changes with every mile. Pavement faded to gravel. Gravel became dirt. The desert air cooled as elevation crept upward, and the presence of civilization, cell towers, houses, the hum of distant traffic, disappeared entirely. For a while they saw other campers off in the distance, scattered like little white shells among the sagebrush, enough to reassure them that they were still on some kind of established route, enough to keep them moving forward as twilight bled into night. But GPS routes are blind to the realities of the land they describe. And somewhere along that lonely climb, the road betrayed them. As the RV climbed into higher terrain, the environment changed. The desert basin fell behind them, and the narrow road wound deeper into hills, where patches of spring snow still clung to shaded slopes. The further they went, the rougher the ground became. The sun dropped behind the mountains, turning the desert floor into a darkening wash of shadow and fading color. The road narrowed and twisted, bordered at times by sagebrush, at others by sloping rock. The earth softened under the weight of the RV, snowmelt seeping up through the ground, turning packed dirt into a hidden trap. At this point, Ronnie was worried. But turning around on this road in a large RV towing a car would be virtually impossible. So they continued hoping the RV would be able to handle the road. Things would work out, it always had for them, but it didn't. Then the RV jolted. The rear wheels sank first, slipping, spinning, digging themselves deeper with each gentle push of the gas pedal. Ronnie tried rocking it, easing forward, easing back, whispering encouragement to the engine like a man coaching an old friend. But the RV didn't move. The desert, once peaceful, fell silent around them. No headlights behind them, no cell signal, no sound except the quiet ticking of the engine cooling under a sky that was quickly losing its light. They were stuck. This was no ordinary roadside stall. They were miles from any town, miles from the last paved road, and miles from the last place they'd been seen. There were no headlights behind them, no passing travelers, no cell signal. There was nothing they could do at this point. They had the comforts of a small home, so they decided to accept the situation and rest until the morning. When morning came, the sun revealed what the night had hidden. The RV sat at an angle and half submerged in a patch of mud thick enough to swallow the tires whole. Climbing back down the mountain the way they had come seemed impossible. Climbing forward into deeper terrain seemed foolish. So they made what felt like the only reasonable choice. Ronnie unhitched the Kia, planning to drive back toward a stronger signal, retrace their steps, or meet another traveler on the way out. They packed lightly, keys, wallets, maybe a snack. They believed they'd be back at the RV within the hour, but the road had other plans. Ronnie and Beverly rode back down the road, believing everything would work out. Just an inconvenience. Another story they can tell about the road. Having the Kia was their lifeline, or so they thought. Just 2 miles down the broken path, the earth claimed a second victim. The Kia slid into another basin of mud, its wheels sinking until the undercarriage kissed the ground. Ronnie tried everything. Beverly encouraged him. Again, they were stuck. But now they were away from the comforts of the RV, and the elderly couple with ailments would not be able to make the 2-mile hike uphill back to the RV. The situation was getting dire. They were stuck in the cramped Kia Soul, with little supplies. While they sat in the car, believing someone would come searching along the roads they should have been on, the truth was far more cruel. They now sat in one of the most remote pockets of Nevada. No one knew they had taken this detour. They were 170 miles from where they were supposed to be. They were not just lost. They were in a life-and-death survival situation. Ronnie and Beverly stepped out into the cool morning light and looked around. The silence seemed thicker than before. No birds, no wind, no distant hum of civilization. They were alone, completely. They stood beside a car that looked like it had settled into its grave. Beverly steadied herself against the door, feeling a cold shiver run up her spine. Ronnie stared down the length of the trail, as if willpower alone could summon another vehicle into view. Nothing moved, nothing came. They looked at their meager supplies and lack of warm clothing. They knew rescue had to come soon. Ronnie tried digging around the tires with his hands, scooping mud away in clumps that stuck to his skin like glue. He found sticks to wedge behind the wheels, stones to give traction, anything. But every attempt ended the same way. The Kia sinking deeper, the earth closing around it. Their family thought they were near Fallon. Searchers, if the alarm were even raised, would look along major highways. Here, buried in the folds of Nevada's most remote terrain, they had become invisible. When the search party begins, they will be hundreds of miles off course from their location. This was a worst-case scenario for the Barkers. Returning to the RV was impossible without the Kia. Walking was out of the question. Beverly's legs couldn't take the rugged terrain for long, and the cold mornings would be deadly without warm clothes. So they made a plan born from survival instinct. They would stay with the Kia, stay together, signal for rescue, wait. As the sun climbed higher, the temperature rose slowly, deceptively, never reaching the warmth they needed. Their mouths grew dry, hunger settled into their stomachs. But dehydration arrived faster. They had no water. None, except what the land might give them. And Ronnie, thinking like a man who refuses to die silently, formed his own idea. He would use the car horn to signal for help, not randomly, but systematically. The first night in the Kia came quickly. Ronnie and Beverly settled into the back seat, drawing close, their breath fogging the dark interior. Even though it was spring, winter clings longer at their elevation. Ronnie turned the key just enough to wake the engine. Warm air filled the car, humming gently through the vents. They had fuel, but not endless fuel. He knew they would have to ration it, heating the cabin just long enough to push back hypothermia, then switching it off to conserve what little safety it offered. When the engine quieted again, the silence returned with a weight that pressed on their chests. At sunrise, Beverly woke with stiffness in her legs and the tremor of chills still running through her body, but the wilderness gave them a lifeline. It snowed overnight. The cold had seeped deep into her bones, but it gave them what they needed. "We need water," she said softly. Ronnie nodded. He knew the truth. Dehydration kills faster than hunger. Snow was their only source of life. As a result of his cancer and related treatments, Ronnie had part of a lung removed, which caused him to have trouble breathing under normal circumstances. At a higher elevation, it was highly difficult. They both had diabetes. If unmanaged under starvation or dehydration, it could complicate bodily functions, energy levels, healing ability, and even cognitive capacity. Running out of their regular medication or being unable to take it properly would have severely undermined their ability to cope. Beverly had joint issues and needed assistance most of the time to walk. Any attempt to traverse rough terrain, gather snow for water, or hike to safety is far more difficult. At 72 and 69, Ronnie and Beverly were no longer physically equipped to withstand prolonged stress or harsh environmental conditions. But even with these limitations, Ronnie opened the car door, the cold air slapping his cheeks, and began collecting the snow. Already weakened from the night, He trembled outside, but he was not going to let Beverly suffer. Once inside the car, the snow slowly melted into cold droplets of water, bitter, metallic, but life-saving. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was hope in cupfuls. Ronnie continued his systematic honking of the horn, sharp bursts, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, the sound of SOS. Still, no answer came. No reason for anyone to be close enough to hear it, but he did it anyway, because doing nothing would mean surrender. The second night was worse. The cold dug deeper. Their bodies, already strained from dehydration, struggled to stay warm. Beverly leaned against Ronnie, listening to his breathing. Slow, labored, fighting. When the engine ran, warmth filled the car. When it was switched off, the dark pressed in like a living thing. Ronnie continued the horn pattern until his arms ached. As the third day of being stranded on a desolate road in the Silver Mountains was coming to an end, Ronnie and Beverly Barker sat in the Kia Soul, wondering if they would somehow get out of this. But they knew the situation was dire, and if help did not come soon, things were about to get worse. Back home, family members were beginning to worry. The Barkers were supposed to reach Tucson by March 29th. When they didn't check in, when calls went unanswered, fear settled into the spaces between conversations. By the time authorities were notified, they had little information to work with. The Barkers were last seen near Stagecoach. They obtained footage from a small gas station in Stagecoach, which shows Ronnie stepping out of the RV, stretching briefly, then filling the tank and purchasing something inside. Their expected route should have taken them south on well-traveled highways. So searchers looked there, not near Silver Peak, the mountains that hid them. Authorities issued alerts, but delays and jurisdictional confusion slowed the process. Nevada's Silver Alert system wasn't designed for out-of-state seniors, and the rules held firm longer than urgency allowed. Days passed before the alert went public. The media caught wind of the story, and the public was now aware of the missing couple. And while the authorities kept searching areas around the highways, the Barkers were ailing and alone on a forgotten road deep in the Silver Mountains. As the morning sun arose, Ronnie and Beverly were fading, slowly, painfully, yet neither surrendered. Their bodies were deteriorating, but their will remained unbroken. Once more, Ronnie forced himself up to collect every step of battle, to gather what little snow could keep them alive. As the snow melted from the previous night, he was now forced to climb a little distance up a hill to collect. For a man with one lung, it took a toll. But he wasn't going to give up. When he returned, he continued sounding the horn in steady intervals, each SOS a plea cast into the indifferent wilderness. The rhythm of survival continued, but it was weakening. Exhaustion had wrapped itself around them both. Beverly's legs trembled even on flat ground. Ronnie's voice grew softer each time he spoke. Their rations, if they could be called that, were gone. Only snow melt kept them alive. And still, they held on. They believed that if they could last another day, someone might come over the ridge. Someone might see the glint of metal. Someone might hear the fading cry of their horn. But sure will and optimism sometimes are not enough. And doom was closing in long before they felt its shadow. By the time the last light faded from the sky, Ronnie and Beverly were already deep into another battle with the cold, one they were losing by degrees. Inside the Kia, the air grew sharp enough to sting the lungs. Their breath shivered out in white plumes. Ronnie turned the key just long enough to let warm air spill through the vents, but the moment the heat softened their skin, he shut it off again. The fuel gauge was their ticking clock, and it was falling. For hours, they sat wrapped in blankets, leaning into each other for warmth, for comfort, for something human against the vast indifference outside. Each time Ronnie's hand twitched toward the horn, Beverly reached for him, steadying him, reminding him of the rhythm they had created together, a pulse of life in a place where no life answered. When dawn arrived, the world did not warm with it. The desert held its cold like a grudge. By the 5th day, Ronnie's breathing was slower now, each inhale a little shallower, each exhale a little quieter. His body, already taxed by years and past illness, was running out of reserves. Beverly studied him, his pale lips, the tremor in his fingers, the way his eyes drifted off before snapping back with effort. She had seen him tired before, never like this. Now she knew the burden of surviving was in her hands. Even if it cost her strength, she'd try to climb for it. She would gather snow, let it melt, and bring it back to Ronnie. Already weakened from the ordeal, she trembled under her weight. She was used to relying on her walker or wheelchair. Here, she had neither. Here, she had only the drive to survive. And for her husband, every step felt like a test she wasn't sure she'd pass. The incline grew steeper. Her breath came in shallow bursts. But she reached the snow, scooped what she could into plastic bags, and made the careful descent back to the car. By mid-afternoon, Ronnie could no longer hide how badly his body was failing. His pulses of the horn became slower, weaker, sometimes fading altogether as he rested between attempts. The rhythm that had carried them this far began to falter. Sometimes he lifted his hand but couldn't bring it down on the wheel. Beverly watched him, fear building like a storm behind her ribs. "Just rest for a moment," she whispered. He nodded, but she saw the truth in his eyes. He didn't want to rest. Rest felt like letting go, and letting go felt like dying. The air inside the car grew still as the afternoon turned to evening. Shadows stretched long over the mountains. The sun dipped behind the distant ridges, taking with it the last warmth of the day. Ronnie's voice softened to a fragile murmur. Bev, I'm dying." The words hit her harder than the cold ever had. She reached for his hand, squeezing tight. "I know you are," she whispered sadly. As Beverly watched her husband slowly deteriorate over the days, the laboring of his breaths, the look of dread in his eyes, she knew death would be a relief to him. But still, she wanted him to live. She couldn't see living on, in this situation, or in life, without him. So she forced herself out of the car again, legs trembling beneath her. The hill loomed above her, steep, rugged, unforgiving, but it held the only water they had. A woman who leaned on a walker at home was now scaling a rise alone, in the cold, in thinning air, because survival demanded it. She filled a bag with snow, praying silently that the descent would not take her strength entirely. When she returned, Ronnie whispered her name, barely a breath, scarcely a sound, but it was enough. Day after day, they clung to a fragile rhythm of survival. They watched clouds drift like ghosts above them, read the Bible aloud to steady their hearts, and let their eyes wander across the beautiful, merciless wilderness that now held them hostage. They reminisced about their family, their shared faith, and the love that had carried them through 40 years of marriage. But here, on a forgotten road in the heart of Nevada, that love, so enduring, so steadfast, was facing its most challenging test. 40 years together, now hanging in the balance. Beverly, at this point, was making the grueling daily climb to collect the snow, risking her life if she fell. The 8th day of being stranded on the desolate road in the Silver Mountains would be different. As darkness settled over the mountains once more, Ronnie's movements grew shallow and distant. Beverly turned on the engine for warmth, watching the heat coax a little color back into his face. They sat together in the back seat of the Kia, the cold settling around them like a second skin. Beverly watched Ronnie's face, searching for signs of strength, of hope, anything. But then she saw the look, a distant, softened gaze, as if he were no longer entirely in the car but standing at the edge of something brighter. "I can see Ananias," he whispered, eyes fixed on a point she could not see. And then, with a sudden clarity that almost startled her, he said, "They'll find the camper." Tears slipped down Beverly's face as she looked at the man she had loved for 40 years, the man she built a life and a family with, the man who had been her constant through every storm. Now she could feel him slipping away. "I love you," he murmured. "Love you too," she whispered back, voice breaking. He took one last breath of desert air. "I know it's time." Beverly held his hand tightly. "Yeah," she whispered, "it's time." Those were the final words Ronnie Barker would ever speak. At 3:12 p.m. on April 4th, 2022, he passed away in the arms of his beloved wife. quietly, tenderly. Beverly covered him gently and closed her eyes in prayer, trying to comprehend the impossible reality before her. But even in the midst of heartbreak, a small spark of hope flickered inside her. Ronnie had told her the camper would be found. He had seen it. She clung to that. Wiping tears from her cheeks, Beverly climbed into the front seat. Alone now, but not defeated, she began honking the horn again. Ronnie's rhythm, Ronnie's plan, calling into the empty mountains and praying that someone, somewhere, would hear, and that a miracle would come. But there was still dread. She was deteriorating as well, and if rescue didn't come soon, she would soon be following her husband. Meanwhile, search efforts were in full force. Even before Nevada issued the long-delayed silver alert, the search for Ronnie and Beverly had already begun, quietly at first, then with growing urgency. By April 2nd, the first Saturday after the couple vanished, a patchwork of Nevada agencies and determined volunteers had mobilized, trying to solve a mystery spread across one of the most unforgiving landscapes in America. Helicopters skimmed low over empty basins, their shadows sliding across terrain so vast it made aircraft look insignificant. Off-road teams crawled through washes and mining tracks, places where a stranded traveler might cling to hope, and where a vehicle could disappear without a trace. Sheriff Ken Elgin of Esmeralda County summed up the enormity of the challenge with stark clarity. We have 3,500 square miles and a population of just 1,000 people. There's a lot of wide open spaces and a lot of area to cover. Neighboring counties stepped in, sending aircraft to run grid searches from the north, while teams from the south scoured remote back roads and forgotten trails. Ground crews stopped at lonely gas stations, questioned travelers, and replayed highway surveillance footage in hopes of catching the Barkers' RV in a frame, and they did. A critical breakthrough came from a small desert town, Luning, Nevada. Surveillance video captured the Barkers' white motorhome passing through on March 27th, shortly after leaving Stagecoach. It was the first real clue, placing them miles deeper into central Nevada than anyone expected. But even with that discovery, the landscape between somewhere and nowhere remained terrifyingly large. As the days ticked by with no sightings, the Barkers family refused to wait passively for news. Their nephew, Travis Peters, a media professional at WTHR in Indianapolis, became the beating heart of the search campaign. Using his connections, he pushed the story into newsrooms, across social media, and into the hands of anyone willing to help. He created a Facebook page, launched an email tip line, and pleaded with Nevadan residents to be the eyes and ears his family desperately needed. The response was overwhelming. Nevadans, strangers who had never heard the name Barker before, took to the desert with compassion as their compass. Off-road clubs searched rugged trails. Drone pilots swept deep canyons and remote hillsides. Locals logged hundreds of miles in the blistering sun and freezing wind, driven by nothing but humanity and hope. Public pressure grew so intense that it finally pushed Nevada officials to bend their residency rules. Despite not being state residents, Ronnie and Beverly were granted a silver alert. On April 4th, the alert lit up highway signs and broadcast networks, warning a wide audience that an elderly couple, traveling in a white RV with a towed Kia Soul, was missing somewhere in the Nevada desert. The world was now looking for the Barkers. But the question remained, had the alert come in time? On the morning of April 5th, 2022, the search entered its 9th day. By then, hope had thinned to a fragile thread, but the teams in Esmeralda County pressed on. The desert was vast, indifferent, and quiet, but somewhere within it, they believed, lay the clue that would finally break open the mystery. That clue appeared as a flicker of white against the muted browns and grays of the Silver Peak foothills. A search team, scanning a rugged mountain track west of the tiny town of Silver Peak, saw something out of place, an unnatural shape partially sunken into mud, sunlight glinting off metal where no vehicle should ever be. A white motorhome. It was the Barkers' RV. Searchers approached cautiously, hearts pounding. The vehicle sat tilted at an angle, wheels swallowed in thick earth, exactly as Beverly had left it 8 days earlier. Dust coated the windows. The door was closed, no movement inside. They called out, no answer. They opened the door. The interior was empty, no Ronnie, no Beverly. For a moment, dread washed over the team. Finding the RV alone without the couple suggested the worst. They might have wandered away and succumbed to the elements, or worse, been taken. But then the searchers noticed something critical. Vehicle tracks, faint but unmistakable, leading away from the stranded RV and down the mountain toward deeper wilderness. Hope sparked. If the Barkers had managed to leave the RV in their tow car, maybe, just maybe, they had survived long enough to reach a more passable route. Searchers followed the tracks on foot and by ATV, moving quickly along the narrow, broken path carved by the Barkers' Kia. The ground grew softer the further they followed it, churned and scarred from where the car had struggled. And then they saw it. The Kia Soul, half buried in mud just as the RV had been. 2 miles down the road, its nose angled toward a slope, its tires deep in the earth. Another dead end in the desert. But this time, there was movement. As they approached the vehicle, the faintest noise floated through the dry air. A honk. A weak, rhythmic tapping of a horn. SOS. Searchers broke into a run. When they reached the car, they found her, Beverly Barker, alive but frail, slumped in the front seat, her hands trembling from exhaustion and cold. She had been honking the horn for days, sometimes every few minutes, hoping the echo would reach ears that might never come. Inside the car was a second scene, one far more heartbreaking. Ronnie Barker, still in the back seat, had passed away roughly 24 hours earlier, his head resting where Beverly had held him during his final moments. The moment searchers opened the car door, Beverly began to cry. Not from fear, but from relief so enormous it overwhelmed her fragile body. She was dehydrated, weak, and suffering from exposure, but she was alive. Alive after 9 days in the desert, after melting snow for water, after losing the man she loved, after honking into nothingness until that nothing finally answered. A helicopter was summoned to airlift her out of the rugged terrain. As they carried her away from the Kia, Beverly turned her head back toward the road, the narrow, impossible road that had become her prison. Her ordeal was ending, but Ronnie's journey had already reached its last mile. Beverly Barker was airlifted to a hospital in Reno for treatment. After more than a week with almost no food and only melted snow to drink, Beverly's body was pushed to its limits. She was dangerously dehydrated, her legs weakened by the relentless cold and the exhausting climb she made each day to gather what little water she could, and yet, against all odds, she endured. "I totally believed in God, but I never felt I was worthy of a miracle," she said. At the hospital in Reno, doctors worked quickly to rehydrate her and treat the effects of exposure. Remarkably, by the following day, April 6th, the 69-year-old was stable enough to be discharged and reunited with her family. Relatives later said she was bruised, exhausted, and emotionally shaken, but had escaped without any major long-term injuries, a powerful testament to her strength and will to survive. While Beverly reunited with loved ones, search and recovery teams remained miles away in the Silver Peak wilderness. Their work was not finished. Ronnie Barker still lay in the back seat of the Kia, and bringing him home required navigating the same treacherous mountain track that had trapped the Barkers in the first place. The crews approached the vehicle with solemn care. The desert that had stolen his life now echoed with the low murmur of voices, the crunch of boots on gravel, the shifting wind that carried nothing but silence. Ronnie's body was carefully removed and placed into a transport vehicle capable of navigating the rugged terrain. Word spread quickly to Beverly, and Ronnie would be returning home to Indiana. Recovery of the vehicles would be a much harder task. In a desolate corner of Nevada's high desert, a stranded white 32-foot RV stood eerily still amid sagebrush and rocky hills, a silent marker of Ronnie and Beverly Barker's ill-fated journey. Enter a special crew of off-road experts determined to bring the Barkers' RV home, led by YouTube personality Dave Heavy D Sparks, and joined by engineer-pilot Mike Patey, a team of workers assembled with heavy machinery for the formidable task. They brought specialized off-road recovery equipment, from lifted trucks with winches to digging tools, and even aircraft support to scout the rugged route. In a collaborative effort, Sparks, Patey, and their crew methodically dug out the Sunseeker RV's sunken wheels and cleared debris around it. Using winches and careful maneuvering, they freed the 13-ton rig from the clutches of sand and mud. The team then located the Barkers' Kia SUV and extricated it as well, having to carve a path back to the main trail for both vehicles. As the recovered RV inched its way down off the mountain under escort, the human gravity of the moment was palpable. This was no ordinary vehicle rescue. It was the retrieval of a couple's dream coach turned memorial. The recovery crew worked with solemn determination, keenly aware of the loss that had unfolded on that lonely mountainside. Family mementos and travel supplies still inside the RV served as haunting reminders of the Barkers' journey. Upon completing the mission, Dave Sparks expressed heartfelt sympathy, offering condolences to the Barker family and noting that his team was absolutely honored to be part of this recovery. It was, in his words, the most bittersweet recovery they had ever undertaken. A successful retrieval carried out with heavy hearts, bringing home the RV and with it the final chapter of a tragic story. Despite her grief, Beverly carried herself with a quiet, astonishing strength. Just days after returning home, she sat down for an interview with the local station where her nephew Travis worked. Her voice was steady, strong, but solemn as she recounted the ordeal that had changed her life forever. Beneath her composure, though, was a woman still holding tightly to the only thing that had kept her alive in those desperate days: her faith. "He meant the world to me," she said softly, a tremble beneath her words. She admitted that the experience, while devastating, had deepened her connection to God. "We knew God was there," she continued. "We were comforted in so many ways by what God did." Beverly confessed she once believed she'd never survive without Ronnie. Yet in the end, there was a strange, heartbreaking mercy to his passing. She knew the man she loved was no longer suffering. If you heard him trying to breathe, it was almost a relief when he did die. His breathing calmed down so much. He was finally at peace, she said. Ronnie and Beverly would have celebrated 40 years of marriage in November 2022, a lifetime of love, devotion, and partnership. And though she now walks forward alone, Beverly carries him with her, in faith, in memory, and in every quiet moment shaped by the man she loved. As the weeks passed, Beverly found herself learning to live in a world suddenly missing its center. Ronnie was gone, and each quiet morning reminded her of that truth. On April 28, 2022, family and friends gathered to honor him, an Air Force veteran who was laid to rest with full military rights. He was survived by Beverly, their 3 children, his sister, and grandchildren who adored him. When asked about the place deep in the rugged Nevada wilderness and what it meant for her, during the day, "It was the most beautiful place in the world," Beverly said. "It's the last place Ronnie would see." She has no plans to return to the remote place where their nightmare unfolded. She holds no bitterness toward the authorities who were unable to reach them sooner. In fact, she praised them for finding her when they did. "They're miracle workers," she said. She would continue. "I think what happened the way it was supposed to happen. We were comforted. We knew God was there. We knew he was going to take Ronnie, but it was okay then because I knew where Ronnie was going," she reflected. For Beverly, there is a quiet comfort in knowing that Ronnie's final days were spent in her arms, in the back seat of that Kia, surrounded by God's creation. He left this world gazing upon the very beauty that had drawn them onto the open road year after year, the landscapes they loved, the places that filled their lives with wonder. In those last moments, they were wrapped in the same majesty that had shaped their marriage, a reminder of all the miles and memories they had shared together. One thing is sure, Ronnie knew his body was failing him, the way a man knows when a storm is coming. With only one good lung, He pushed himself past a reason. He did it for the woman he loved. He did it so Beverly might live, even if it meant he would not. And if he were given the choice again, he would meet the same fate without hesitation. Beverly carries that truth with her now. She honors him not with grand gestures, but by living, quietly, steadily, fully. She moves forward the way they once traveled those long miles in the RV, chasing open skies and empty roads. Each day she wakes and draws breath is a soft echo of his sacrifice. A quiet tribute to Ronnie's love, a love that didn't end in the Nevada wilderness. There's nothing quite like the joy of a road trip, the freedom of the open highway, the changing landscapes rolling past your windows, the quiet moments of wonder shared with someone you love. It's one of life's simplest, purest adventures. But even the most beautiful journeys carry quiet risks. In our modern world, we trust our GPS like a compass carved in stone. It tells us where to go, and we follow, sometimes too blindly. It's in those moments when the pavement fades to dirt and cell service vanishes that preparation matters most. That's when awareness becomes your lifeline. If you ever find yourself stranded on a desolate road far from help, your will to survive is the strongest tool you carry. Panic is your enemy, clarity your ally. Assess your surroundings and your resources. Conserve energy. Every decision you make matters. Stay with your vehicle unless you have absolute certainty of a safe, reachable destination. A car is easier to spot than a person, and it provides shelter from the elements. If you can, signal for help in any way possible. Set out visible markers, create contrast against the landscape, honk the horn in patterns like SOS, or use mirrors and movement to catch attention. Ration water. If there is snow, melt it slowly and sip it. Never eat it raw, or it will lower your body temperature. If you have no food, don't despair. Humans can survive weeks without it. But hydration and warmth are non-negotiable. Move purposefully, not frequently. If you must leave the vehicle for a short distance, mark your path. Make it easy to retrace your steps. Night will come, and with it, cold. Layer what you have, huddle. Pray if it brings you comfort. Sing if it keeps your spirit sharp. Most of all, remember this. Survival is not always loud and heroic. Often it is quiet, a whisper of endurance, a choice made again and again not to give up. You may feel alone, but you are not forgotten. Someone is looking for you. Believe that, hold on to hope. As long as you breathe, you fight. As long as you fight, you live. Drive with wonder in your heart, but wisdom in your hands. Let the road take you somewhere unforgettable, but make sure you come back with stories, not scars. Because the open road can be a beautiful place to lose yourself, but only if you're ready to withstand an outdoor disaster. If you've made it this far, please consider clicking those subscribe and like buttons. Want more outdoor disasters content? Check out these videos I believe you'll enjoy. Thank you for watching.